So this is actually a special episode of the Behind the Rolling Stone Cover podcast because 50 Cent is taking his incredible album Get Rich or Die Tryin on tour in Australia this December. We don't have 50 Cent in the room to interview for this, but I wanted to read it because I feel like it's this masterclass in cover story writing, definitely Rolling Stone cover story writing. So as a reader, you feel like you are in the hotel room with 50 Cent when the author, Touré, takes you into that room. And then even though he takes you out of it for a little bit when he brings in people like Dr. Dre and Eminem with their incredible quotes that are featured throughout, you don't move too far away from that hotel room, and it really does feel like a fly on the wall moment. And it kind of plays out in terms of the structure of it like a movie. Like it really does feel like you are watching this movie script play out in front of you. And it makes me actually wonder if it was used as a reference point for the Get Rich or Die Tryin movie that came out as well. So without further ado, this is the Rolling Stone cover feature from April 2003 on 50 Cent, written by Touré. 50 Cent is coming to Australia and New Zealand to tour his seminal album, Get Rich or Die Tryin, this December. It's the 20th anniversary of one of the most iconic hip-hop records ever made. He'll play every song off of the album, some he hasn't performed in over a decade. You can get your tickets at livenation.com.au or if you're in New Zealand, at livenation.co.nz. This is 50 Cent, The Life of a Hunted Man by Touré, which was the April 2003 cover of Rolling Stone. At 12, he was a crack dealer. At 23, he was nearly shot to death. Now, at 26, he is a hip-hop ruler, and old rivals want him dead. It's well past 4 a.m., and 50 Cent's bodyguards are out in the hallway of the hotel, lazily leaning against the wall or completely asleep. 50 is inside his room, still pulsing with energy. 3 hours ago, he finished the biggest show of his career yet, a sold-out date for a crowd of 15,000 at Long Island's Nassau Coliseum. When 50 left the venue, he was surrounded by a ring of bodyguards until he climbed into a bulletproof GMC Suburban. A convoy of 9 trucks followed him 3 minutes down the road to his hotel. Now, as his crew prowls for groupies, 50 is keeping a room full of friends in stitches, telling stories about his past with the same mix of "he didn't just say that" humor and gruesome detail that has made him the most exciting new MC and the coolest new villain in hip-hop since the emergence of Eminem. Tonight, he'll hold court for 3 or 4 hours straight until it's time to leave for a date in Baltimore. There's a thin wife-beater covering his chiseled torso and a Yankees hat balanced at an angle atop the white do-rag on his head. His navy blue bulletproof vest is there on the floor. On records, 50 projects a scary crack dealer, but among friends, the screw face drops. He's animated, a street corner shit talker who knows where all the bodies are buried and knows no one can make him shut up. When he gets around to talking about his 6-year-old son, Marquise, who appears in the Wankster video, his son's mother pulls his picture out of her wallet. She calls him a hip-hop baby. One time, he was watching TV with another little kid, 50 says, and a person got shot and died, and he said to the other kid, "That's weak. My daddy got shot a lot of times. He didn't die." Everyone laughs. "I had to tell him that was a special situation," he says. "You're not supposed to get hit that many times and get away." Violence has been a constant in the life of 26-year-old 50 Cent, government name Curtis Jackson, nickname Boo Boo. His mother, a drug dealer, was killed when he was 8. At 12, he became a dealer and was nearly shot to death at 24. His first hip-hop mentor, Jam Master Jay, was killed execution-style last year. Just 4 days before this very evening, an empty SUV owned by Busta Rhymes was hit with 6 bullets while parked in front of 50's manager's office. And right now, there are people who want 50 dead. Some have suggested that it's other rappers who are trying to kill him, but 50 says hatred from his old competitors in crack dealing has multiplied because of his fame. "This ain't no rap war," he says. "This had nothing to do with no rappers. The gangsters don't like that I do whatever the fuck I want to do. I'm moving around. I'm all over the country. I'm making money. I'm a motherfucking star. That bothers an N-word. The people that dislike me have nothing to lose. I'm from the bottom. They're uneasy about still being on the bottom. 50 gets through his days in bulletproof trucks, walking with 4 to 6 bodyguards just 9 inches away, ushering him briskly through streets and doors. But his body language and demeanor show him unmoved by the threats of his life. He never refuses to stop for an autograph or a photo request, even when it exposes him to danger. Is he worried about his grandparents who still live in Queens, New York, in the house where he grew up? He says his reputation is enough to protect them. They, his would-be killers, know how I am. Anything go on around there, they need to move everything they love. Their mammy, their pappy, their kids, all that shit. They'd start some real nasty shit, and they don't want to go through that. He seems confident he won't be killed, unperturbed by being hunted. It won't matter to me, he says. That shit is not important when you got finances. Do I look uneasy to you? He does not. In this hotel room, he's boisterous, arrogant, secure in his own skin, and having fun. The man from the gutter in Queens who nearly ended up in prison or dead is the biggest new star of the year. His gory, brilliant major label debut, Get Rich or Die Tryin, sold 2.1 million copies in its first 3 weeks. Nearly all hip-hop fans know the broad outline of 50's life story. The ghetto celeb crack dealer who escaped the drug game by thrusting himself into hip-hop, only to have his enemies follow him into his new life. One day in 2000, just months away from the release of his first album, he was shot 9 times. His album was shelved, but 50 became a street legend on the strength of underground mixtape hits, which are now collected on Guess Who's Back. Last year, Eminem and Dr. Dre signed him to a joint label deal, and M featured 50's Ja Rule diss Wankster on the soundtrack to 8 Mile. Dr. Dre produced Get Rich's first single, Into Club, and 50 went platinum in just over a week. As soon as he walked into the studio, he picked up a pen and we were done in an hour, says Dre. We just made some shit we wanted to hear. Part of 50's success is his unique voice, with a slur that's the result of the hole in his jaw from a bullet to the face. But a bigger part is his credibility. When he talks about drugs and guns and death, you know he's speaking from experience. If he says he's going to pop you, you think he might, says Eminem. Kids want to see a guy that got shot that many times and lived. There's a whole mystique about him. But at the same time, the same kids that are going to the shows are a little bit intimidated by him. Maybe not all, but most. He's definitely out there. And that's me saying that. I think kids like me like the fucking bad guy in a film, 50 says. People love the bad guy. I watch movies all the time and root for the bad guy and turn it off before it ends because the bad guy dies. It's cinematic law, the bad guy has to die. But sometimes the bad guy gets a record deal and becomes a superstar, like 50. Curtis Jackson was born July 6, 1976, on the south side of Jamaica, Queens, a rugged, drug-infested strip. Nearby residents describe it as the main area for all the up-and-coming crack dealers. That was their playground, says one. That's where they got their stripes. A lot of N-words dump bodies on that side of town. Young Curtis never knew his father, and doesn't want to now. Let's give him a warning in this article, he says. Don't you even dare crawl your ass out this way. I don't want to know the N-word. 50's mother, Sabrina Jackson, was only 15 years old when he was born and wasn't around very long. She dealt cocaine. My mum's was hard, 50 says. She's real worse than me. She wasn't really feminine like that. My mum's was tough, like man tough. Curtis spent most of his time with his grandparents because his mum was out working. She used to substitute finances for time, 50 remembers. Every time I seen her, it was something new for me. Christmas every day. She put jewelry on me early. When Curtis was 8, someone went home with Sabrina, put something in her drink that left her unconscious, closed the windows, turned on the gas, and left her for dead. She was found a few days later. Had to be something to do with the drugs, 50 says. Her body was all fucked up. She was 23. He moved in permanently with his grandparents. They tried to steer him away from the street, but he was Sabrina's boy and thus able to hang out with the older guys in the neighborhood. When he was 12, those guys gave him some cocaine to sell. They knew nobody was there for me, so they gave me a little 3.5 grams and said, "Here, start hustling," he says. The other kids my age wouldn't even know what to do if you gave them a scale and baking soda and a pot to cook crack up. Of course, at 12, he could hustle only between 3 and 6 in the afternoon when his grandmother thought he was in an after-school program. I did things in the street. Then I was able to adjust and leave that at my doorstep. Once I get in the house, I'm my grandmother's baby. But once I'm outside, I do what I gotta do to get by. He can still flip that switch between tough and sweet whenever he likes, moving in a heartbeat from the charm of a soft-spoken choir boy to a teeth-clenched, icy grill that would make you throw your wallet at him in fear. He's clear about when and where to employ each one. I know I gotta be able to separate in order to progress, he says. In 10th grade at Andrew Jackson High School, 50 was arrested for possession of crack and given juvenile probation. He transferred to another school, but it didn't matter. I was fashion show in high school. After the first time I got in trouble, I'd pop in when I had something nice to wear and shit. He dropped out after 10th grade. He got his GED in jail a few years later. By this time, he was a budding boxer and a rising street icon, a ghetto celeb feared throughout Queens, in control of a crack house and the main drug-selling strip around the way. At 18, 50 was making $5,000 a day selling crack and heroin. He bought himself a white Land Cruiser and a white Mercedes-Benz 400 SE. He's always been known for doing something crazy and wild, says Shah Money XL, a longtime friend and president of 50's indie label G-Unit Records. People around Queens be like, I know Boo, he was crazy in school. He used to come to school with mad money and guns. 50 used a lot of intimidation and strategy to maintain his hold on the strip. During one of his prison stints, he met some thieves from Brooklyn. Back on the strip, he employed them to rob rival Queens hustlers. He'd let the stick-up kids keep whatever cash and jewelry they got as long as they gave him all the drugs. Then he gave the stolen drugs to his customers when they bought his crack as a buy-one-get-one-free deal. This forced his competitors to carry guns, which meant they had to scatter when the cops came. So they had to come and leave, he says. Consistency is the key to all success. If you can consistently sell crack without the cops coming, you're going to be successful. If you consistently put out quality material in your mixtape, it'll build anticipation for your album. 50's not proud of having sold drugs, but he feels no guilt about it either. Guilt? He asks, a little annoyed. Hell no. Guilt for how? Try telling a kid that's 12 years old, if you do good in school for 8 more years, you can have a car. And let a kid's curiosity lead him through the neighborhood and find somebody who can get it in 6 months on that strip. It don't seem like one of the options. It seemed like the only option. I provide for myself by any means. I don't care about how anybody feels about it. Because when I'm doing it, I don't have intentions to hurt nobody. I don't expect everybody to understand, but there's people that's from where I'm from that understand. In the summer of 1994, 50 was arrested twice in 3 weeks and knew he was headed for death or prison. It was coming, he says. Long as you stay there, you don't beat the odds. For years, he'd been going to friends' basements and rhyming to instrumentals for fun. Now he thought it was time to get away from the drug world and try hip-hop. He knew nothing about constructing songs, but he told himself he would succeed. Once I focus on something, it gotta work for me, he says. I won't turn off from it. I convince myself it's going to work, and then no one can convince me that it's not. In 1996, a friend introduced him to Jam Master Jay, who was then organizing his label, JMJ Records. Jay taught 50 how to structure a song. Jay knew 50 was the shit, Shah Money says. He was treating 50 like a big-budget artist. Jay produced 50's first album, but it was never released. In 1999, 50 moved on to Columbia Records, where he recorded another album, Power of a Dollar, which included the underground classic How to Rob, in which he describes mugging a slew of rap and R&B stars and lays out who 50 Cent is, the fearless and funny thug who's just a minute off the street. The song exploded on the hip-hop underground and on the radio. 50 had always admired how KRS-One had roared into hip-hop behind a diss record, South Bronx. Now he'd done the same. One night in a club, 50 said, "What's up?" to a man who happened to have stolen a chain from Ja Rule. Ja saw 50 talking to the man and felt disrespected. Thus began a feud. Wangster and a slew of records dissing Ja and Murder Inc. head Irv Gotti followed. Things got physical one day in Atlanta. Ja and 50 were staying at the same hotel, and when 50 saw Ja, he pulled him aside to talk. He was looking real stupid, 50 says. He had one of them little bats they give you at the baseball games for your kids, and he had the little tough look on his face. Their talk didn't last long. I let him go on for about a minute or two, And then I just punched him in his eye. I heard enough of that shit. 50 says anger is his most familiar emotion. Something happened that another person might start crying about, I get mad. Some people know how to express themselves emotionally and cry and do all that other shit. Me, emotionally, I'm like 13. Months after the Atlanta fight, in a scuffle with Ja Rule's crew at the Manhattan recording studio, The Hit Factory, 50 was stabbed. Though not seriously. Charges were dismissed. But while the Ja Rule beef merely got people talking about 50, he gained respect when Jay-Z responded to being dissed in How to Rob by saying, "I'm about $1. What the fuck is 50 Cent?" on It's Hot, Some Like It Hot, from Volume 3, The Life and Times of S. Carter. When he responded, I was complimented, 50 says. He wouldn't say nothing back to somebody he didn't think was hot. I never went to radio until after he said that about me. I don't know if my career would be where it's at if he didn't respond. 50 was poised to be a star. In a few months, his album was to be released, but there was at least one contract on his life. Some say 3. Where I'm from, the price of life is cheap, he says. For $5,000, you could kill somebody. You could pick a shooter. You could have a few different choices. You might do it for less than that if they like you. On May 24th, 2000, death came for a visit, and his life changed forever. He was at his grandmother's house, on his way to the tattoo parlor and then to the studio at about 11:20 in the morning. He got into a friend's car, then was asked to go back in to get some jewelry. When he returned, he slid into the car. Another car pulled up. Someone crawled out of the back and came up on 50's left side with a gun cocked. Sneaky motherfucker, man, 50 says. He did it right. He just didn't finish. He like Allen Iverson shaking an N-word. Go to the basket and miss. The man hit him with 9 shots at close range. 50 took bullets in the hand. Shell hit my thumb and came out my pinky. The hip, that one hurt. The calf and the chest, and one to the face, went through his left cheek and into his mouth. You don't actually feel each one hit you, he says. The adrenaline is pumping. You're moving and trying to get out of the way. I was bouncing around in the back seat. We pulled off. We got a block or so. We had to pull over to get rid of the tote. A gun. Threw it in the sewer. Then we got to the hospital. But I was up and still talking the whole time. A few weeks later, the shooter was murdered. 50 denies responsibility. He spent 13 days in the hospital, then staggered out on a walker. 6 weeks later, he began walking on his own. Now life was more precious to him. He began working on his body with endless push-ups, pull-ups, and sit-ups that turned him from kind of fat to chiseled. But more important for an MC, there was now a large, squarish hole through the left side of his lower jaw and a piece of bullet left in his tongue. He lost a bottom tooth and a U-shaped chunk of his gums, but his lazy tongue and the hole in his jaw gave him a slur like no one in hip-hop. There's a different sound now when I talk because of the air around the tooth, 50 says. Getting shot just totally fixed my instrument. The story of the shooting of 50 Cent spread throughout hip-hop and made him seem mythical, even unkillable. But as soon as Columbia heard, it dropped him. I wasn't sure if the industry was ever going to embrace me again, he says. In January 2001, he began spending every day at Shah Money XL's studio, making songs for the underground mix CD world. He released 5 albums of material within months, flooding the market as no MC ever had. I thought, this dude got shot, got back up, and is still popping shit, says Eminem. He came back stronger than ever. That made me stop. Eminem flew 50 out to LA for a meeting. When everyone else was afraid to work with me for reasons outside of music, he looked straight past that, 50 says. One of the things that excited me about Tupac, Eminem says, was even if he was rhyming the simplest words in the world, you felt like he meant it and it came from his heart. That's the thing with 50, that same aura. That's been missing since we lost Pac and Biggie, the authenticity, the realness behind it. Back in the hotel room, it's almost morning, and 50's still telling stories. First about when Foxy Brown came to visit in the hospital, then about an old friend with such bad luck he got arrested almost every time he left home. It's almost time to leave, so he slips on his bulletproof vest and begins pulling the Velcro straps tight. He's richer than ever, but he's being hunted. N-words out there selling drugs is after what I got from rapping, he says. When you walk into a club and the bouncer stops doing whatever the fuck they're doing to let you in and say, everybody else wait, he's special, that's the same shit they do when you start killing N-words in your hood. This is what we've been after the whole time, just the wrong route. Everyone turns when Marquise's mum holds up a tailor-made kitty-size navy blue bulletproof vest that her son will wear on stage this summer at his father's shows. There's something cute and funny about it, but no one laughs. 50 Cent is coming to Australia and New Zealand to tour his seminal album, Get Rich or Die Tryin', this December. It's the 20th anniversary of one of the most iconic hip-hop records ever made. He'll play every song off of the album, some he hasn't performed in over a decade. You can get your tickets at livenation.com.au or if you're in New Zealand, at livenation.co.nz.